Welcome to Power and Counsel with Pastor Sammy, where your life will supernaturally walk on water.
Welcome to this program, Power and Counsel with Pastor Sammy. Have you ever been in a situation where you've lost everything and you feel that what you've had up to right now, it's gone? The plans that you had are probably changing on you so fast. You probably even find yourself in a situation where you have to be out of town or you are fleeing for your life, and just everything that you had faith that was going to work in a certain way has just totally turned around. The Bible is full of examples. One of my favorite examples is Jacob in Genesis chapter 28. He messed up a lot, and there was a lot of injustice towards him in reality. And he felt that he had to remedy it by being a trickster. The problem is that between him and his mom, they were always conspiring to try to get what was really due to him, really ended up backfiring on them, and he had to flee. He had to flee from his family. He had to flee from where he lived and leave everything behind. What's interesting is that most people think that when you mess up and you lose in life, that's it. Start all over again or start in a different plan. But in reality, that is when we have one of the most notable stories in the Bible happen, in which God gave him a dream where there was angels coming up and down from heaven to earth. And I always bring that story up because despite the fact that he was on the run, despite the fact that he lost a lot and he was away from his family and he had to run for his life, God still gave them that dream and told them there's a blessing from heaven to earth. Despite the circumstances here on earth, there's still a blessing from heaven to earth that you got to climb up. You have to get back up from the sleep and keep going. Have you ever gone through a hard time? Have you ever gone through a time of crisis? Or you think that success is not for you? I have today a wonderful guest that we've had before, and I encourage you to look him up in our previous programs. His name is J.J. Arms, or J.J. Arms the third, and he's been with us where he spoke to us about the life of his father, and we made a tribute program in that episode. But today he has some special insight in regards to life, just life, his success, as well as the things that he had to overcome to still be there, and what role did God have in the middle of it all. Mr. J.J. Arms, welcome to your program, Power and Counsel. Please say hi to everybody.
Good afternoon. Greetings.
And before we go on, I know that there's some people that have not heard of you before. Please tell them in a nutshell, what is it that you do and where they can reach you in case they would like to connect with you more, especially the unique services that you offer.
My name is J.J. Arms III. I'm an international private investigator. I am a lifelong resident of El Paso, Texas. I was the managing partner of and the assistant chief investigator for The Investigators, which is a family-owned private investigator firm that was owned and operated by my father, J.J. Arms Sr. I am now living in Dallas, Texas, where I've started my own firm. My firm is known as Arms International Investigative Services, LLC, and we're based in Dallas, Texas. If you'd like to know more about my company or the services that we offer, my website is www.armes-international.com.
And again, those services are for everyone international?
Everybody. Whatever your needs are, whatever walk of life you're from, wherever your problem may be in the world. That's what makes us unique and different. If you have a problem in your hometown of El Paso or wherever you may be, or you have an issue in another part of the world, Brazil, Mexico, Japan, Kuwait, wherever your issue may be, we have the ability to service you and to help bring resolution to whatever kind of problem you may have.
Thank you so much for sharing that information, and I hope that the Lord brings the right people so that you may be able to help them in that unique manner. And is just that you're not just local, you're at an international level. So I'm hope and pray that God brings you more and opens more doors for you to make the difference in people's lives.
Thank you, Pastor.
Now, Mr. Arms, can you share a little bit with us? You know, the success that you're at. You have your own firm. Has it always been at this level of success, or can you tell us a little bit, a recap of how did you get there, and is there anything that life threw at you that you had to overcome?
Yeah. You know, I never believed that I am at the level I should be. I've never believed that I was at the level I should be, or at the level that I was capable of achieving at any point in my career. I've been doing this for 36 years now. It's been a long, tough road. I work with my dad all over the world on some very, very difficult, complex, dangerous cases. My dad is considered the top private investigator in the world. I am, because of my work and the amount of time that I've put into this and the success that I've had in resolving the cases that I've resolved on my own and with my father, I'm considered pretty good at what I do as well. But it's been tough. You know, a lot of times when you become recognized for your work, whatever that may be, people think that it happened overnight. People think a lot of times that the guy just got lucky. You know what I'm saying? You can only be lucky so many times. And for you to be truly successful at whatever you do, you have to be consistent and you have to be dedicated. And there's a lot of stuff that people don't see. There's, for every one success, there's 1,000 failures. There's 1,000 setbacks. There's 101 reasons or 1,000 reasons why you shouldn't succeed. But those are the things that people never see and never hear about, you know, and never celebrate. But, you know, we've been very blessed. The Lord has sent us some very unique cases, very unique clients. One of the reasons why our firm was so noteworthy, and by our firm, I said my father's firm and my firm, the investigators, when I was still working with him, we specialized in the cases that no one else could solve or wanted to solve, or they were too difficult or too dangerous. They were places
Like
in the
what,
world.
particularly like what kind of cases you're saying is the ones that no one wants to touch, or the ones that are too different? What are we looking at here?
Cases, yeah, kidnapping cases in third world countries, kidnapping cases in Mexico, kidnapping cases involving the cartel, homicide cases involving the cartel,
Wow.
where the people want to know who was responsible for the murder of their loved one, the disappearance of their loved one. No amount of money is worth, you know, a lot of times solving those cases or working those cases. Yeah. The benefit is not worth the risk. Those are the kind of cases that we specialized in, for good or for bad. But that is what the niche that we found ourselves in. That was the thing that we found ourselves to be good at. And that's what we dedicated ourselves at throughout our career. And that's what I'm still doing today. But you know, speaking to the title of your message for today, I am a testimony to exactly what you just described. You know, I from my earliest memories of working with my dad, you know, growing up with my father and him being as successful as he's been all these years, I always knew what I wanted to do. I always knew what my destiny was. My destiny was to become a private investigator and to work with my father, and ultimately to take over the business. That was not only what I thought, I believed, and I hoped would happen. That was my agreement with my father. You know, there was no other consideration. There was no other thoughts. That's just the way it was going to be. You know, when my dad decided to retire, the business would be mine. Everything would be run by me, and I would take over and carry the torch. You know, although I have a brother and a sister, none of them were really interested in the business. My brother tried it for a little while, but it's a very stressful business. It's a very difficult business, and it's not for everyone. And so my brother, you know, worked with us for, I think, a year or two. And then he bowed out and decided that this just wasn't the life for him. and went on to do something else. My sister had zero interest in this business, and I was the one that just, like I said, for as long as I can remember, this is all I wanted to do. And this is what I've dedicated my entire life to do. I was licensed at the age of 18. Within a couple of weeks after I turned 18, I was one of the youngest licensed private investigators in the country. By that time, the funny thing was I already had years of experience working with my dad. You know what I'm saying? Side by side, going to murder scenes and kidnappings all over the world, and going to autopsies and just, you know, photographing the crime scenes, photographing the dead bodies, photographing the autopsy processes to document, you know, those were my duties. And my dad was training me and grooming me to be an investigator from a very early age.
And
But
you know, just taking the, like you said, just taking those pictures,
mhm,
it is not for the faint of heart.
no,
Just
definitely not.
gathering that information is not for the faint of heart. You gotta
No,
have some strong fortitude to be able to do that, and that just can't be something that you're gonna psych yourself up to be. You, like you said, you already had to have some kind of almost like a predestined call to have this you know, the predisposition to be able to do that kind of work.
no, it's definitely not for the faint of heart. It's definitely not something that
Hmm.
is for just anybody and everybody. You know, in all fairness, a lot of private investigators have something, you know, they specialize in certain things. I'd say the vast majority of private investigators that you will encounter, that you find on the internet, um, they do domestic cases. They do cheating spouses. They may do, you know, trace down phone numbers and simple tasks. Some people who are retired law enforcement, um, especially detectives when they retire, they may have been a detective in burglary or a homicide detective. So that is their specialty. That's what they know. That's what they have their training in. So when they become retired and they go into the private sector as a private investigator, they may specialize in homicide investigation. Um, but very few people, you know, especially in the private sector, specialize in kidnapping or that have the full range of skill sets or can handle just about any type of investigation that they're tasked to investigate. It could be a burglary, it could be a missing person, could be a theft or a fraud, maybe an embezzlement case, kidnapping, murder cases in third world countries. Kind of like Natalie Holloway. You know, she went to Aruba as a teenager, as a high school graduate, and that was their senior field trip. And she goes to the island of Aruba and completely disappears off the face of the earth. You know, unfortunately, when you travel in a third world country, you don't realize that you're dealing with a third world country and the resources are third world country. Law enforcement, they don't have the type of training that we have here. A lot of those people have no law enforcement training. They assume the role either because they were elected or a family member appointed them chief of police. You know, this is especially true in Mexico, you know? Um, so when a loved one is murdered in a third world country, you know, there's not a big chance that that murder is going to be resolved. It will most likely go unsolved. You know, you can call them and they'll keep telling you, oh, we're working on it. But in reality, they don't know how to investigate it and they don't even know where to start a lot of times. Or because of corruption, they've been paid off and they're not going to solve that case. That case is going to go unsolved. And that's where someone like us comes in. So, yeah, it's a tough business.
Yeah. And so I mean it's a tough business, but yet you are having out of the ordinary success doing it. Has anything ever happened that, you know, like we've had a conversation before, you were in one of our episodes before, and you said that behind a strong man there's a strong woman, but sometimes we gotta connect to something more than just family. We gotta connect to something more than just, I guess, a spouse to a certain extent. There's gotta be a divine connection. Is there somehow or the other, if you can share with us how your faith has gone you beyond when you shouldn't have? Maybe something around your world is hitting you, because there's a lot of things that happen behind the scenes, in ministry and business and in any kind of field, in any kind of career, that's gonna hit you, and it's gonna hit you hard. Is there anything that has hit you hard that kind of wants to disinflate your life like a flat tire, and you feel you can't go on?
Oh God, there's been so many.
Uh-huh.
You
Could you
know,
share anything that would inspire our audience in that sense?
absolutely. You know what? And normally I wouldn't discuss these things. I'm a very private person, but your message and the title of this particular podcast episode, it strikes a chord with me because I'm living testimony to what you just described. As I was telling you earlier, I knew what my destiny was. There was never any doubt in my life. A lot of times people, they'll meander, they'll come in and out of what they thought they were supposed to do. They think about it, they change their mind. I never did that. I always knew what my destination in life was and what my objective in life was, and it was to be the best investigator that I could possibly be, and to try and be as good, if not better, than my father, which was not an easy task. Even to be in the same category as him was not an easy task, just because of what he's accomplished in his lifetime. But I am fortunate in the sense that I was able to do that, and not because it was easy, and not because I have any kind of supernatural powers. It was because of dedication, hard work, determination, and my belief in God. With respect to you saying, is there anything that, besides a wife, a supportive wife, that helped me achieve and be successful, doing the things and solving the cases that I've solved? Absolutely, without a doubt. And I know exactly what that is. And that is my belief in the Lord Jesus Christ. It's very easy, as I said previously in your previous podcast, for non-believers to see something that you've done, something that you've achieved, and say, oh, that guy, well, he studied that. That's what he's done his whole life. Of course he solved that case. You know what I'm saying? It wasn't God. It wasn't, what he says it was, or what he's attributing it to. It was luck. It was, something else. But I'm the person that worked it. I know the circumstances. I know how impossible the task was, and I know how and why I solved it. I can't tell you how many times I'll be working on a case and I'll pray about it. I said, Lord, please, send me the answers. Put me on the right path so that I can resolve this case, or so I can track this person down, or so I can find the answer that I need to solve this mystery. And the clue that I need, the answer that I need to put me on the right track will pop into my head. Is it luck? Is it training? Is it coincidence? I don't think so. When something happens once or twice, okay, it's possible it's a coincidence. But when something happens consistently, especially after you pray, and then you get the answer, to me, as a believer, that's not coincidence. That is the Lord answering your prayers, answering my prayers, and putting me on the right path so that I can help my client. And by the same token, go ahead.
No, no. I mean, it's interesting how you're saying all this. I mean, God has gone you through the success in your life, but I'm interested to know if you can share as well. You mentioned your father, and there's a previous episode on your father, specifically on your father. But I would like to know is you were basically basically for a good chunk of his career, you were running the show to a certain extent. You were, you were the nuts and bolts to a lot of what was going on in the business. But yet now you're in Dallas. You said, well, how was that transition? What led you to move so far away from, let's say, where you were at? and expand in that manner? And was what kind of struggles did you face, and how were they overcome?
Well, here comes the part that I told you was something that I'll share with you, because I think that this is something that a lot of people can relate to and a lot of people need to hear. Because it's one thing to be in the situation on the journey to wherever it is that you're going to end up, but I kind of have made it to the other side,
Mhm.
despite all the trials and tribulations and obstacles that I had in my way. Um, so it gives me a little bit of insight, and it gives me the ability to tell people that it is possible to make it through to the other side if you have a firm belief in God and you believe that He will see you through whatever trial or tribulation that you are experiencing. As I told you previously, I knew exactly what my destiny was. But the reason I ended up starting my own agency, leaving El Paso, which I had lived in El Paso my entire life, never had any real intention of leaving El Paso until I retired someday. But because of my commitments, because of my family, because of my ties to the community, because of work, I couldn't leave El Paso. I had no intention to leave El Paso. My office was in El Paso. My building was in El Paso. Everything was in El Paso. I just had too much responsibility and too many obligations. And, my dad, when it came time for my dad to retire, and he was supposed to retire and pass the torch over to me, and I was supposed to carry on, just doing what we've done for what I had done for, 33 years. He was going to retire. As many of you saw in the newspaper and on the news, he was going to retire, and he wasn't going to retire, and he was going to retire, and he wasn't going to retire. And to his credit, I believe that my dad, that's what he is. That's who he is. My dad has known nothing else but work. He doesn't know how to have fun. He doesn't know how to relax. He doesn't know how to go on vacation, because all he's thinking about is the cases and the clients and how to solve this case. And it's just not in him. You know what I'm saying? So the thought of him retiring is the worst possible outcome in the world. He'd rather die than retire. That created a problem. That created a problem between him and I, a difference of opinion. And, there's a time where you need to pass the torch, for health reasons, for a lot of different reasons. And that was kind of an issue that we were having. Because, there comes a time where there's a lot of things that you can beat in this world, but age is not one of them. Eventually, age is going to catch up to you. And I'm not the same as I was when I was 25, and it's a tough business. Mentally, it's extremely taxing. It's hard on you. It's hard on your family. It's hard on your loved ones. And it was hard on us. So between that and some other circumstances, I had to make the decision to basically hit the reset button on my life, on my entire life. And I prayed about it. And at the time I was still married, and I told my wife, you know what? I need to leave El Paso. It's time for me to go out on my own. And she said, well, where are we going to go? I told her, I don't know. I have some ideas on where I'd like to go. I said, but I'm going to put it in the Lord's hands. I said, because it's one thing for me to say, I'm going to move here, I'm going to live here, I'm going to do this. I said, but I think this time around, I need to let the Lord decide where I'm going to be. And wherever He creates an opportunity for me, obviously that's where He wants me to be. So long story short, as I was talking to some of my friends, sharing my thoughts with them on what was going on and where I was thinking about moving to. I was originally going to move to Arizona. I'd always liked Arizona, Phoenix and Scottsdale area. And, I explored, opportunities there, and they just weren't working. It was during COVID, so it was even worse. And everyone kept telling me, Jay, you need to be in Dallas. Dallas is the place for you. Dallas is where you need to be. There's a lot of opportunities there. I think that you would do great there, especially with what you do, what you offer. That's where you need to be. So I came up here. I uprooted my entire life. And when you say you have to start every day, you have to start from start all over again. That's basically what I did. I sold everything. I gave up my lifelong career at my dad's firm, moved to a city where I basically support. Came around faith, and I made up my mind that I was going to start a career to work for the company temporarily while I was gathering my thoughts and expected divorce because of all the stresses that piled up over the course of being married for 30 years. That goes back to what I was telling you about all the stuff that people don't see behind and the success, the victories. It's hard. That's why there's such a high divorce rate of police officers, because it's tough. You bring that stuff home with you, and unfortunately, it carries over times to your family. They see you upset, they see you stressed out, they see you working excessive hours, so you're not able to attend family events and family functions, and it all takes a toll eventually. And but I'll give you a perfect example when I tell you that divine intervention was at work. I came here basically Halloween night a couple of years ago, loaded up my truck and just brought some very basic stuff, not knowing if I was going to be here for more than I had planned to be here for 6 months. So I drive out of El Paso on the night of Halloween, drove 10 hours, 10 and a half hours to get from El Paso to Dallas, continuously. As I was arriving in Dallas, Texas to my destination, I get a phone call from my son telling me that one of the kids that he knew that was the son of the doctor had been murdered in Dallas, Texas. The boy was from El Paso. He was attending college in Dallas. And it was extremely upsetting because I knew the boy, I knew the family very well. Doctor was someone who I considered a friend. And I called him just to give him one. I said, Dylan, I need you to please make sure this is not just a, because the internet, kids, things get blown out of proportion a lot of times. It's not accurate information. And he says, no, Dad, I already checked this out. Several different people. It really did. And it happened tonight. So I called my doctor friend. I just wanted to reach out to him, let him know that, he had my deepest condolences and that I was there for anything that he needed. Never intending for me or anything. I just wanted him to know that he was not alone and that he had my condolences and I was there if he needed me, just as a friend to talk to. And literally, I had been in Dallas, Texas, in City, for 5 minutes. So I spoke to the doctor, and he tells me, I need to hire you to find out and kill myself. I'd been here 5 minutes. To me, that's divine intervention. That's not gas. It's things like that that happen during my lifetime. That remind me that the Lord is the one that is helping me. The Lord is guiding me, and He's opening doors. Another thing that, when everything that you thought was your destiny, or everything that you thought was supposed to be what you were intended to do, it gets pulled out from under you, or that whole plan goes up in smoke, or you go through divorce, you have family members or friends betray you, you lose everything, or you know what I'm saying, you're starting from scratch all over again. It's tough. It really is tough, and it's very easy to lose faith. It's very easy to lose hope. Just to give you my personal testimony, and I'll give it to you, just kind of, I guess the easiest way to say this is, if I can survive everything that's happened to me in the last 5 years of my life, you can definitely get through what's going on. And I would like to share how I got through those things. So, back in 2017, everything's great. My the pinnacle of my career. My son, I have a daughter named Alexa. She's my oldest, and I have a son. That's my youngest. And Dylan, in particular, he's a soccer player. He's a soccer player since he was 4 years old. Martial artist. But soccer was something that just my son connected with at a very young age, and it was just a passion. So here's Dylan as a high school senior at the height of his career. You know, he's worked very hard through his entire high school career as a soccer player, as a student. He is able to contribute to the team's success. They make it to state or all district. He is nominated as one of the top players in El Paso, first team, all district. He goes before the academics, the award ceremony that they have for local athletes that reach that level, being recognized. He gets interviewed by one of the TV stations because he got a scholarship to go to university to play soccer for the university, and he's being recognized as one of the top soccer players in El Paso. So Dylan is out. Everything is just panning out. I mean, he's doing fantastic. Everything that he had dreamed of doing as a soccer player, including playing college soccer, was happening for him. And this is 1 week before he graduates high school. He's going to pour out of high school at the time. So simultaneously, I had my daughter Alexa. She had finished college. She studied broadcast journalism at ASU. Had originally intended on being a news reporter. She wanted to be an anchor. And she had gotten a job with E-News. If you're familiar with E-News in Hollywood. And it was a great opportunity for her. She had an intern there, and when she graduated from college, they wanted to work for them. So we were moving her to California. I needed to move her to California during that same time period. So my wife at the time and I loaded Alexa up, drove to California. We're setting her up in an apartment so that she could start her career. And while we're setting her up, and I had never left Dylan. We'd always left, a family member with him, to kind of keep an eye on him. Not that he needed it, but, they're high school. High school kids do dumb things, you know what I'm saying? And my biggest worry is him having a crazy house party. You know what I'm saying? And tearing up the house and, terrorizing the neighbors in the neighborhood. That's what's going through my mind. But he's like, look, Dad, I'm a senior. I'm almost graduating. I'm 18 years old. I'm 17 years old. I'm about to be 18. I don't need a chaperone or supervisor. Let me stay here by myself. I'm going to chill out this weekend. I'm not going to do anything. So we figured, okay, you know what? He's right. So here we are. I remember it was like on a Saturday night. We had been working all day long setting up my daughter's apartment. And at like 11:45 California time, we get a phone call on my daughter's cell phone. And anytime you get a call at that time of the night, it's never good news. So, I answered the phone and thinking it was my wife's phone, actually, because my daughter and my wife both had iPhones. So I thought it was actually my wife's phone. And there's a woman on the other end saying, can I speak to the father and the mother of Dylan Arms? And my heart dropped. And yeah, I still get a little choked up about this. But as soon as I said, this is Dylan's father, my ex-wife dropped to her knees. Immediately, she knew it was bad news. I immediately thought, my first thought was that he had been in a car crash. Because that's typically what happens to young kids. They're out with their friends and something like that happens. Well, she says, my name is so-and-so, I'm a nurse. And I'm here with your son at the hospital. And I asked her, so what happened? She says, your son's been involved in an accident. And once again, I'm thinking car accident. I said, what happened? She says, well, your son was at the bonfire at Coronado out in the desert, and he fell into the fire, and he's severely burned. So I was, needless to say, nothing shocks me. Being seen and experienced everything that I've experienced over the years, it's hard to get me. And I was just devastated. So she says, look, he's okay. He's here at the hospital. But I need you to come like as soon as possible. I said, I'm in California. I can't get there quickly. I said, but I'll send my father and my mother. But it's going to take them at least half an hour. She says, no problem. I'll be here waiting for them. So I get her information and call I call my parents, wake them up, told them what happened. I told them I need you to get there as soon as possible. So my dad and my mom rushed to the hospital, and one of my son's friend's parents is there with me. And, they see my son. My son is severely burned. His face, he basically, if you do a push-up and you touch the floor, everything that would touch the floor while you're doing a push-up was burned on my son, from his face to his knees, to his legs, to his hands. His hands were severely burned. And that's the state he was in, and he was in severe pain. They couldn't give him any tranquilizers because they didn't want him to go into shock. And, my dad calls me and tells me, hey, it's pretty bad. You need to get here. So it's now close to 1 o'clock in the morning. Here I am trying to find a flight at 1 o'clock in the morning to get back to El Paso from California. It's virtually impossible to do. So then now I'm looking at chartering a private jet to fly to El Paso. This quickest, only way to get there quickly. And while I'm doing that, I managed to book a flight. On my way to pick up my stuff at my hotel so I can rush straight to the airport. And I get another call. And it was that my son's burns were so severe that they couldn't treat him in El Paso. He had to be sent to the burn hospital in Lubbock. And growing up in El Paso, anytime you heard about someone being sent to the burn center in Lubbock, it was bad. There was a severe car crash where the person was trapped inside and they were burned, or it was an oil field explosion and the person was severely burned. So that made it even worse. I knew at that point that it was bad. So needless to say, my wife is having a meltdown. She's besides herself. I'm besides myself. We're trying to keep calm, and I'm trying to keep it all together, keep it together for her. And I called my dad and said, hey, I need you to tell me the truth. I said, how bad is it? He said, it's pretty bad. So my brother-in-law he was a nurse, is a nurse. He went there and assessed the situation, filled me in, same thing that my dad said. And he said, look, they're going to fly him to the burn hospital. If I have your permission, I'll go with him. I told him, no, I want you to fly with him. I don't want him to be on the plane alone. So they flew him in an air ambulance from El Paso to the burn hospital in Lubbock. And my ex-brother-in-law flew with him. So now all the arrangements that I had made that basically was almost impossible to do to get to El Paso, now I got to change that and get to Lubbock, which is even harder to get to Lubbock from California. Long story short, I ended up getting there like an hour after Dylan gets there. It just by happenstance, because they had to pick up someone else before they transported my son that was in even worse shape than him. So the air ambulance had to go pick up someone else, drop them off, then go get my son and drop him at the burn hospital in Lubbock. So my ex-wife and I walk into the emergency room where my son is at, and I can't even describe what I saw. It was, my son had severe burns on his face, on his hands, on his legs. It was just unlike anything I'd ever experienced in my life, and I was just besides myself. I had never been that crushed. That's the only way to explain it to you. I was crushed. And I never felt more helpless in my life. I mean, there was nothing I could do to help my son or to eat. He was in so much pain when he was in El Paso. He was asking my father to knock him out, to just knock me out, punch me and knock me out, because the doctors wouldn't give him any morphine or any painkiller. And he was just in severe pain. And my father was like, I can't do that. I can't do that. So here we are, still seeing the same thing. My son was unbelievably calm. And, they take him in, and for the next probably 10 days, we're there at the burn hospital, sleeping on the couch. Both of us sleeping on the couch in the room next to his bed. And my son is going through these treatments. They have to, when you have a burn, the primary issue is infection, because your skin, which is your protective layer, is no longer there. So you're highly susceptible to infection. So to combat that, what they have to do is, and what causes infection is not just the air, but it's the tissue. The burned tissue starts to decay, and that causes infection. So they have to scrape that dead tissue off of you while you're burned. So every morning they were having to take my son into the shower, sit him on a little stool in the shower under the running water, and the nurse would go in there and they would scrub the dead tissue off of my son. And I can't tell you how painful that could be. You know what I'm saying? And I would hear, we were in the burn meeting, and we could hear grown men screaming every morning. Grown men that were in car crashes and oil field accidents and all these different things, house fires, and they were screaming at the top of their lungs. My son was in there, and you could barely hear a peep out of him. My son is incredibly strong, incredibly strong. And even the nurse said, you know what, I can't believe how strong your son is. He goes, I've had grown men. I just had a grown man punch me in the face yesterday, and your son is just taking it like nothing. And I will say this, and the reason that I mention this story is because my entire life I've been a Christian since I was a young boy, and it was instilled in me by my parents. I was raised a Baptist, went to church every Sunday, prayed every night without fail. And that was the first time in my life I actually had a crisis of faith. For the first time in my life, I could not understand why God would allow that to happen to my son. My son hadn't done anything wrong other than being, youthful, young, and dumb, as all our kids are at that age. They think they're bulletproof. I just couldn't for the life of me understand why the Lord would let something like that happen to my son, to a child. And not only that, something so painful. There's really nothing in this world that is more painful than a burn, especially when you're burned on that much of your body. The surgeon himself told me that. So I couldn't understand why that was happening. And I was just absolutely devastated. I was worried that my son, I knew I wasn't going to lose my son, but I figured that he was going to be maimed. Like you see all these people, in newspaper articles and on the news that are severely scarred for the rest of their life. And they have the classic, scars that you can never really correct. And I had thought that was going to be the way my son was going to be. And the thought of that just absolutely devastated me. But despite that fact, they had a chapel in that hospital, and every single day I would go there and I would pray. And I would pray that the Lord would take his pain away and give it to me. And one of the most crushing things for me was, I was trying to figure out what I could do to help my son. And I said, well, because they were telling me your son's probably going to need skin grafts. And having had experience with my dad, because when my dad lost his hands, they had to take skin from his legs, from his thighs. And to this day, he has those scars on his legs. So I knew what skin graft scars look like. And I thought, on top of everything that has happened to my son, on top of the scars he was going to have on his face and his hands and his arms and his wrists and his, everything else, he's going to have these giant patches missing from his body, probably his back or his thighs. And I said, at the very minimum, I want to give him the skin. I want the skin to come from me so that it won't come from him. And when I told the doctor that, they were like, they can't do that. I said, why not? He said, because his body will reject it. He goes, you're his father, but it's not going to be a tissue match. His body will reject it. It has to come from maybe his sister. And I didn't want that to come from my daughter. So that's when I was at the lowest point of my life, because I said, I cannot even give that to my son. So that's when I really started to question my faith. But I will say this, because it was such a well-known incident, because there was tons of kids at that bonfire, and everyone basically saw it happen or knew about it or heard about it. So basically, so many people, including the news in El Paso, heard about my son's accident. The news was calling me, and of course, I didn't want to comment on it. But people started calling me and messaging me and calling my family and messaging my family and my daughter. And they were telling us that they were praying for Dylan. I had friends of friends calling me and telling me they were praying for Dylan. I had entire congregations of churches praying for my son's healing that I didn't even know in other parts of the country. At the end of this week, I had thousands of people praying for my son who I didn't even know. And what turned it around for me was every single day, my son was basically wrapped up in bandages like a mummy in his hospital bed, and he couldn't move. And every single day they would take off the gauze to see if he was healing and to get him ready for the bereavement treatments in the shower. And every single day, Pastor, I saw healing that shouldn't have happened. I mean, I literally saw healing overnight. One night it would look this way. The very next morning, after praying myself and my son receiving the prayers of thousands of strangers, I would literally see healing. And it shocked me. It shocked the doctors. It shocked the nurses. They couldn't believe what they were seeing. They were like, wow, I've never seen anyone heal this quickly.
Wow.
And this is what I tell you, that when someone is of faith, they know what they're seeing. They know it's not coincidence. They know it's not happenstance. You know what you're seeing. And to me, it goes back to the Lord says that when you pray with 2 or 3 people or more, your prayers are amplified. And I sincerely believe that that's what happened. My prayers and all the people who were praying for my son, their prayers were amplified, and it was manifesting itself right before my eyes. And I realized, and I asked the Lord to forgive me in that chapel for doubting him, for accusing him of doing that to my son, when I realized it was the devil that did that. The devil does those things to shake our faith. You know what I'm saying? And a lot of times, one of the things I've learned through that incident, through another incident, and through other things that have happened, through family and friends, something I heard when I was going through all these different crises over the past few years was that the devil uses the people you care about the most to hurt you the most, to shake your faith. Because if it was someone that you didn't care about, it wouldn't bother you. So, to me, seeing what happened to my son, seeing how quickly he was healing before my very eyes, I was literally seeing it. My son was released from the hospital in just under 2 weeks, which he should have been there for at least a month. The doctor said he had never seen anyone heal. Of course, we had to take him from there back to El Paso, and I had continuous treatments every morning and every afternoon, cleaning his wounds and taking the bandages off, and putting the bandages on. I continued seeing healing. And to my son's credit, my son is a very tough, very dedicated person. Once he makes up his mind, I guess it's an arms thing, you can't shake him. And my son, kids are cruel. Kids are very cruel. My son missed his high school graduation. Remember, this incident happened 1 week before he was supposed to graduate. So he didn't get to go to his high school graduation. He refused to watch it on the internet because it just hurt him too much to not be there. As far as he knew, and what the kids were saying on the internet, the kids, amongst themselves and in the chats and everything else, they were saying that my son was never going to walk again. He was definitely never going to play soccer again. He was going to lose his college scholarship. And instead of my son being devastated by that and allowing those things and those comments to discourage him, it motivated him to show them, no, I am going to walk again. I am going to play soccer again, and I'm not going to lose my scholarship, and I'm going to play this fall. My son has a soccer coach by the name of David. David and my son became very good friends. David took it upon himself to help my son. When he spoke to my son and saw what happened to my son, he offered to help. David told him, "Look, man, you probably not going to be able to play, and you're going to lose your scholarship. But if you want to really try and pursue this, I will continue to train you. I'll train you, and I'll get you ready." So my son and David worked. My son was going to occupy because he had to learn to use his hands again. And believe it or not, it was incredible. This is what I'm saying about the healing and supernatural intervention. There's no logical explanation for my son's hands healing completely. I mean, completely. He has burns on his wrists that, he has the classic burns from a burn victim on his wrist, but not his hands. And his hands were severely burned. His entire face completely healed, not a single scar. His legs, which also should have had the same burns as you appear on his wrist, completely healed. He has a couple of keloids here and there from scar tissue, but other than that, completely healed. You can't explain that. And he learned to walk again. He had to learn how to use his hands again and everything, get his motor skills back. And then, despite being in so much pain from the burns, I don't know if you've ever burned a finger or anything, it hurts just to move it. So Dylan was training with David every single day. He was swimming. And the funny thing is, when the coach who recruited him for college first recruited him, they give you a list of exercises that you're supposed to be doing during the entire summer to get you in shape for your season. And they test you when you get to college. And if you are not at the level that you need to be when you get there, because you haven't been training, you don't make the team. So here's Dylan, fresh off a huge accident, against all logical explanation and against all odds, has trained all summer long. He finally makes it to college, never tells his coach that he got injured. Because he talked to his high school coach and says, "Look, coach, what do I do? Do I tell the coach that I had this accident? Or do I not tell him?" The coach told him, "Look, if you have every intention of going, then don't tell him. And if you're training and you're showing improvement and you believe that you're going to be able to be to contribute to the team, then don't tell him. But if you're not going to go, you need to tell him so that he can fill your spot." My son says, "No, I'm going to make it." So on the day that he shows up for college, they tested all the athletes because they want to see where you are and see how good you are and where you are as far as your physical fitness. My son was tested along with all the veteran players, the seniors, the juniors, and the freshman players. And my son tested like number 2 amongst all of them as far as endurance and speed and everything else. Once again, divine intervention and dedication by my son and his coach. So that's one thing that I tell you that it really opened my eyes and it renewed my faith in God. And it showed me firsthand, because very, very infrequently do you get to see the Lord's work right before your very eyes. And I firmly believe that what I saw every day when they would take off my son's bandages, it was the power of prayer. It was literally the power of prayer by strangers. And so that was another thing that happened to me. And then, as if that wasn't enough, just as I'm mentally getting over what happened to my son and trying to process this whole thing and come to grips with, what I've just seen and what I've just experienced, which was tremendously difficult on me and my whole family. My daughter, who's now beginning her career in Hollywood, she left E! News, went to go work for a production company for Sony, doing a TV show called SWAT in the production. She was on the filming side. SWAT is on CBS. Here she is at a brand new company, working 6 days a week, and she had this cough. And no, I got a cough. Excuse me. But, when you're a college student, college students don't take care of their health. They don't eat right, they don't sleep right. Excuse me. So we attributed this cough, to my son, my daughter just coming out of college. She's 22 years old. And we finally make her, I tell her, Alexa, you need to go get this checked out. Excuse me. Because her cough was becoming more and more prevalent. She's like, Dad, I work 6 days a week. They were, one day they film at 3 o'clock in the morning. Another day they film at 7 o'clock in the morning. Another day they start filming at 12 noon. I can't miss a single day of work. And I don't have a work schedule. It's whenever we film is when we film. So I never know when or if I can go to the doctor. So I said, look, you need to get this checked out. I'm going to make an appointment for you. And, at a clinic. Since you can't go to a regular doctor, we'll send you to a clinic after work. And they can tell you what's going on. So I don't want to say against her will, but against what she wanted to do, she begrudgingly goes to this clinic. And the doctor checks her out. She's the last patient of the night. And the doctor takes an x-ray of her chest, comes out and tells Alexa, look, I see a shadow in your chest, and you need to go straight to the emergency room. And my daughter's like, what is it? She goes, I don't know, but you need to go to the emergency room now. My daughter's like, well, I can't go. That's why I came to you. She's like, you need to go get checked out. There's something in there. It could be nothing. It could just be an anomaly, but you need to get this checked out. So my daughter calls me all upset and saying like, I don't have time for this. I don't want to deal with this. I'm not going to go. And I told her, look, either I'm going to go take you or your mother's going to go take you, but you're going. So I called my uncle, who was a radiologist in California, and told him what was going on and asked him what I should do. And he recommends a specific hospital for me to send her to, which was a teaching hospital. And once again, this is where divine intervention comes in. So my daughter goes to this first hospital, which is a kind of a general hospital. They check my daughter out. My ex-wife goes up there and takes her at like 6 o'clock in the morning to get x-rayed to make sure that the first x-ray was correct and to have it diagnosed. And once again, they see a mass. And they tell my ex that she has a tumor in her chest. So now it goes from a cough to a tumor. And they tell her we need to send her to have that biopsy to make sure that it's not cancerous. Right? My daughter's 22 years old. So they send her to the next hospital, which is the sister of that hospital. So the next hospital is a specialty hospital. So they go and they send her to a doctor. And the first hospital, I talked to whoever was in charge there, and they said, you know what? There's a very skilled surgeon. He's a thoracic surgeon, and he's one of the top surgeons in the entire country at removing, tumors in the chest and dealing with things like that. I don't know if we can get him for you, but if anyone is the one that you want to get, it needs to be that guy. I don't know what happened or who made the calls that they did, but we ended up getting that surgeon, divine intervention, because there was a lot of different people that we should have gotten instead of him, but we got him. He goes and they biopsy the tumor in my daughter's chest, and they determined that it's cancerous. And it was so big, it was impeding her breathing, and it was touching her lungs. Her lungs couldn't even expand to full capacity because of that. So obviously, that's the word for a parent. That's the absolute worst news in the world that she can possibly do.
How old was she at that time?
How old?
Yes.
22.
Oh, Lord.
22 years old, just starting her life, just starting her career. It was just, like I said, the worst possible news you can possibly get. That absolutely devastated, because while I had that accident with my son, I knew I wasn't going to lose my son. I just thought he was going to be scarred. But with my daughter, I actually thought that I was going to lose her. And just the thought of that was just unbelievable. You know, I'm a pretty tough guy, you know, and I've been through a lot. I've seen a lot. I've experienced a lot. But nothing like that prepares you for something like that. Or so I thought. So once again, divine intervention comes in. The doctor tells me, look, that tumor has so many vessels, blood vessels. If I try and cut it out, extract it, because that was the most logical thing to do. You got something that doesn't belong there. You need to get it out, right? He's like, I can't do it. He says, if we start cutting, there's a chance that she'll lead to death. So the only way to do this is to radiate it and give her cancer therapy. So she needs to go to an oncologist. I said, you know, here's my daughter. I'm from El Paso, Texas. My daughter's in Los Angeles. I don't know anyone in California as far as doctors and what hospital to use and what hospital not to use. But he tells me, look, there's a very well-known oncologist, cancer surgeon. My daughter was diagnosed with classic Hodgkin's lymphoma. And she says, this doctor is graduated top of her class from Harvard. She's one of our top instructors for doctors. She's a specialist in Hodgkin's lymphoma. She's a specialist in immunotherapy, and she's just a fantastic doctor. She studies all these new techniques. She's on the cutting edge of medicine, but once again, she's extremely hard to get. She doesn't take every case, and she has a ton of work, and the chances of us getting her is not very good, but I'll do everything I can to make sure that she gets on your daughter's case. Sure enough, of all the doctors we get, he goes, oh, I said, well, where in all of California is she? She goes, she's at our sister hospital. There was a third hospital. So they had a general hospital, a specialty hospital, and a cancer hospital. Specialist in cancer. Like I said, of all the places that I could have gone to, what are the odds of us having all those resources all in one place and them all being tied together? I get this doctor, this cancer doctor. She takes on my daughter's case. And unlike what happened with my son, my daughter didn't, very few people knew about it. Not even my own family. My daughter she was horrified at the whole thing. And she didn't want anybody to know. She didn't want absolutely anybody to know. And it was extremely traumatic for her, to, number one, be that, the thought of you being 22 years old and your whole future going down the toilet, and the thought of dying at 22 years old is enough in itself. And then she had to go through the cancer treatment, which in itself is a nightmare. She lost all her hair, and she had beautiful hair. It was devastating for her, and it was devastating for us. And I'll tell you what, if I had thought that what I went through with my son was difficult, what I went through with my daughter was 10 times that. But going back to your message, and going back to my point, had I not gone through what I did with my son 2 years earlier, I honestly don't believe I would have been able to handle mentally what happened with my daughter 2 years later. So, in essence, the Lord put that tragedy with my son in my life to strengthen me and prepare me mentally and physically for what I had to go through to be there to endure what that whole situation was bringing on us mentally and physically and psychologically, and to be there for my daughter during that difficult time. So that prepared me. I wholeheartedly believe it, and I see it now. I didn't see it at the time. It prepared me for what happened with my daughter. And once again, I'm telling you, with the Lord protecting myself and my family through prayer and through belief, my daughter was cured. She's in her 3rd year now of being in remission. She's in the best shape of her life, best health of her life. And I'm very, very blessed and very grateful. But my point to all this is that all these tragedies that befall you, befall me, befall all of us, it's difficult to deal with any one of those things in a lifetime. But to deal with all those things, one after another, it's been tough. It's been really tough. But
Well, I know that and like in the previous episode that you shared, was that the epiphany that your father had was that when tragedy happens, it's not necessarily that God does this, but he works through it. It's the enemy that comes to attack and try to destroy our lives. And I would like to think, thinking about how you're moving to Dallas, and then in the middle of trying to move and then still pursuing your life, and now it seems that the enemy tries to, like you said, hit you through where it hurts, hit you through your kids. Um, it reminds me of some studies from psychologist Yavok Trope. By the way, he did a lot of studies in regards to reasoning and the reasoning of the mind. And from the psychological perspective, he says that distance is important because it helps us improve our thinking, it helps us improve our decision making. But in the time of crisis, even though there is distance, the brain starts shutting down and it goes more into the instinctual reaction. And I think despite the fact that once we come to our instinctual reactions, despite going in there, we walk in the spirit of God, and that kind of taps us into like, okay, wake up and come out, because you have a larger plethora of things you can tap into for help, instead of just your instinctual life that says, that's it, we're gonna cave in, and we're gonna give in, we're gonna give up.
yeah.
And it reminds me of Psalm 23, as a matter of fact, where it says in verse 4, even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. But the thing is, sometimes we will walk through dark valleys of our life. But verse 6 says, surely goodness and love and mercy will follow me all the days of my life. So despite the fact that we go through bad stuff, yet still God has a way for bringing out goodness and mercy and love towards our life. And despite the fact that we're going through hell, Philippians chapter 4, 6-7 from the ESV version says, be not anxious about anything, but in everything by prayer and supplication, with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God. And the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and minds in Christ Jesus. Now, it's interesting. It says, will guard your hearts and your mind, because the thing is, that's when we're facing tragedy, Mr. Arms, what goes on in our heart and our mind, a lot of people lose heart and they lose their mind. Absolutely. They lose their mind, and they crash down. They go into depression. They suicide. They give up. And so it's interesting that the Bible doesn't say And the peace of God will take you out of the hard time. It says the peace of God will guard you in the middle of this whole thing, and particularly will guard your heart and your mind. Um, this is amazing. This is amazing. The story is amazing. I thank you for sharing it with us. And the wonderful thing about being able to produce programs like this is that they're good for the now, and they're also good for the posterity. It This could be heard today, this could be heard tomorrow. This could also be heard, Mr. Arms, 80 years from now.
Absolutely.
What would your words of power and counsel will be? And I would like to make this very distinct. What would your words of power and counsel would be for your descendants, who are probably going to be here way after you are, and for anybody who's going through a hard time in their life? Can they still achieve success despite tragedy?
Absolutely. You know what? And I think this is very important. The key to everything, it's not enough just to pray. It's not enough just to believe. People who are going through hard times, soldiers who have PTSD, people who are going through divorce, people who are going through medical issues, people who are going through things in their lives that they think is the end of the world, especially in today's society with our children and the teenagers. They can't handle stress like we did. They can't handle pressure. You know, there's an old saying that diamonds are formed under pressure. A diamond doesn't turn from carbon to a diamond by just not being subjected to any pressure. It's under tremendous pressure to create a diamond. And, you know, you can't just hope and pray that things are going to get better. You also have to do a few things. One of the things that I did to get through everything that I got through besides praying was I filled my mind with positivity. And you've got to fill yourself with good things. And one thing that worked for me tremendously is every single day I would listen to Joel Osteen on my way to work or to on my commute, and filling myself with those messages, praying, meditating and praying while I was driving. This is something that I do every day to this day. Every single morning I meditate and I pray for an hour. Those are the things that you have to do. You can't just, prayer is not enough. Hope is not enough. Faith is not enough. You've got to do other things. And I can't tell you, and this is something that's very important to me, because it's, you know, seeing the things that I've seen, especially like being present for autopsies, it's hard to describe the process when you see an autopsy. Basically what happens is you've got an individual who was someone's loved one, their father, their son, their brother, their friend, and they're on a table, and there's a pathologist there, and he's basically taking the body apart and piecing it out. They take the skull cap off, they take the brain out, they examine the brain, they measure the brain, they slice the brain open to see, you know, if there's anything in the brain that shouldn't be there, tumors, any kind of anomaly. They take the organs out, they take the heart, the liver, the kidneys, and they're examining and weighing. And by the time the process is over and you're watching all this process, you realize we're nothing in this life. We're just a bunch of pieces put together to make a person. But it's the person's spirit and his soul that makes that person who they are, not the body. And that's something that had a profound effect over me over the years. The more I saw this, the more I realized we're just pieces put together, and it's our soul that makes us who we are, or who we're not. You know what I'm saying? And I can't tell you how many times I've had cases, and my dad has had cases, where we're investigating a suicide, or people hire us because they say there's no way that my son committed suicide. So they're in denial, or they have serious suspicions because things just don't add up.
Correct.
And a lot of times when we find out that, through our investigative process, we find out it really was a suicide. I can't tell you how many times you look and see the reasons behind that person's suicide and how minuscule the problem really was in comparison to what they did and how it affected everyone around them. I mean, I've seen people kill themselves over breaking up with a girl or breaking up with a man. I've seen people, I had a Navy SEAL that we investigated a suicide over that was $1,200 in credit card debt, and he was having girl problems. When you think about if they would have just waited another day or another month or 6 months, things would be completely different. If they would have reached out and asked someone for help, hey, look, I've made some stupid decisions. I owe some money. I need to pay this debt. I need some help. They'd be surprised. I mean, if they would have gotten that money, you can't help but think if things would have turned out differently. My point is, besides the prayer, besides having faith, you need to take action, and you need to realize that every problem is just temporary. I can't tell you how many things I've gone through in my life that I thought would never end. But all good things come to an end, and all bad things come to an end eventually. And you've got to know that whatever bad thing that you're experiencing is going to end eventually. Every bad thing that has ever happened to you, if you're still alive today, you obviously survived every bad thing that's ever happened to you. And just like you survived those, you'll survive what you're going through now. You can't lose hope. You can't lose faith. You got to pray. You got to believe. And you got to keep working, and that is what I would like my family members to know, my descendants to know, and that's what I'd like your listeners to know, especially the people that are struggling and going through hard times. Let me tell you something. If I can survive what I've been through all at the same time, I can't tell you how stressful it's been. I can't tell you how difficult it's been. But I'll tell you what, I made it. I'm testimony to being a believer. And I'm here to tell you, you'll make it. You got to believe, you got to work at it, and you got to have faith. But you got to fill your mind and fill your heart with the right things. Positivity. Don't focus. The biggest mistake that we make, in my opinion, in life, especially people who are negative, is they're always focusing on what is going wrong and what they don't have. If you take a minute and realize all the blessings that you have in your life and everything that's going right for you, and you focus on the positive instead of the negative, it will change your life dramatically. It'll change your view on life dramatically. And all I can tell you is whatever you're going through, don't give up. Be faithful, pray, believe, and the worst thing you can do is just kill yourself, because you don't know. It's very selfish. It's very selfish, and some people say, well, I don't care. But you don't understand the effect that your death will have on your parents and your brothers and your sisters and your friends and your family. Because not only that, you may make them do the same thing, because they're so devastated at losing you. But remember, nothing is forever. Nothing in life is forever, good or bad. And you'll get through it. And that's my small piece of wisdom that I can impart on my
It's a big
personal experiences.
That's a big piece of wisdom. And so thank you so much, Mr. Arms, for joining us. And if any one of you that are experiencing a hard time right now, and you would like to have some prayer, make it, we'll go ahead and put it in the comments section, or send us a message if you would like to make an appointment to meet with us, or look in the information. And our email is there. Our phone number is there as well. And we would love to be able to pray with you or give you some spiritual direction as well Of course, this does not substitute, professional help that you are under or any medical treatment that you're going under. But I do want to emphasize the fact of your spiritual connection with God. I had quoted Psalm 23, and it's where it says, surely goodness and mercy will follow you all the days of my life. But it also says, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. And the reason it emphasizes, I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever, is, are we in God's house? And I know that not just anyone comes into my house unless you're invited in. But my children, whether they're outside or inside, or they have the ability to come in and out without permission because they're my children. And they have the right to come in to the Father's house. If you have not had that opportunity, or you feel that you have a lot of questions and direction is, what do? I hear a lot about faith in God, but maybe this is something that you are not familiar with. We would like to be able to help you and be a guide for you. And if you can, please connect with us. We would be more than glad to give you that direction. How can you be connected to the Father's house? Well, I'll tell you right away, right now, is you got to be his child. You need to be a child of God. And God, though, has made the ability for us to be able part of his family through his son, Jesus Christ. And he is more than willing and wanting for you to come home and be in his house. We go through a lot of hard things in life, but our connection to God as our Father is what's going to help us get there. Mr. Arms, thank you so much. And it's nice that it's good that you're hearing Joel Osteen. My wife already looked at me right now. But for now, you need to add Power and Counsel with Pastor Sammy with Joel Osteen.
I certainly will.
I believe we're like Joel Osteen, but with a good steak and some salsa, homemade salsa on the side. And for everyone else, please send your prayers over for our guests as well. Mr. Arms, may God bless you. May God use you. And may his blessings just flow more and more in your life. And may you seek more and more from the Lord, and to walk in those blessings, and also to break any kind of generational curses that are going on, and make a change for the rest of your life. And I am honored to have you here and be part of this historical moment, for you to be able to share insight, not just for our audience, but also for your family and your family's future. And everyone else, until next time, thank you so much. Join us again so that together we will supernaturally continue to walk on water. Be blessed.